What's up, Shellheads? Guys, we are in year number 40 for the heroes in a half shell. And guys, we are getting a gift for new fans, old fans, and everybody in between. Guys, let's crack into it. So we are in year number 40 for the TMNT franchise, and there has been multiple iterations over the years. There's been multiple versions. There is a version of the Turtles for everybody, regardless of age, regardless of when you became a fan, when you were introduced. We are at the point where there are full arcs that have different vibes, different tones, that resonate with different people. And that's the beautiful thing about this franchise. And that's the beautiful thing about the type of creators that this franchise tends to invite. Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird really sought out to establish early on this open door policy that says, hey, come tell your story. When Turtle Mania really set off and really became a huge thing, they brought in different artists, different storytellers to come in, tell your story. Could be a one-off, could be a mini series. And Turtle fans of a particular vintage will tell you that that resulted in some stories being better than others, but we got a wide variety nonetheless. And I believe that spirit continues on today. That's part of why I've been so vocal about things like Mutant Mayhem and giving Mutant Mayhem a chance for older fans that grew up on the 80s cartoon, on the 90s movies, on the Mirage run. Just like I would say to folks that know more of the rise of the TMNT or know more of the live action films from Michael Bay or the Mutant Mayhem universe, to go back and take a look. Okay, so great. These stories are good. Now, let's go back and let's take a look at what came before, because there are wonderful stories in every single generation. And so it's year number 40. And in the current landscape, we have a couple of things going on. We've got the Mutant Mayhem universe. We've got the IDW universe. We've got the Last Ronin universe. And we very easily could have gotten just an oversized IDW run as a gift for 40 years of Turtles, kind of wrapping up some things, have it in a nice little bow. That whole series is getting new number ones. And so it would be very easy to just put a nice bow there and give it to us fans. But no, says I, there is so much more coming. Y'all, we are getting a 40th anniversary comics celebration that honors the franchise's many incarnations. Y'all, we are getting a collection of stories spanning 9 different versions of the Turtles. Guys, we are getting 3 stories in the Mirage Comics era, 2 stories in the IDW era, 1 story in the Saturday Morning Adventures era, 1 story in the Archie Comics era, 1 story in the Image Comics era, 1 story in the 2003 animated series universe, 1 story in the 2012 animated universe, 1 story in the Rise of the TMNT animated universe, as well as 1 new story from the man himself, Kevin Eastman. So IGN released an article that has some insights from different creators that have been involved with the different versions of the Turtles, and they were asked to share their thoughts on the anniversary of the Turtles as well as this new project that's coming out. And we have some words from Jim Lawson, who was involved with the Mirage and Archie runs. And he says, how does destiny work? Is it something that you create for yourself, or are there forces out there pulling you towards what you were seemingly meant to do? Either way, somehow I found my way to Mirage. And from there, I spent 35 plus years drawing the Ninja Turtles and more. As I like to think, just as destiny intended, 6,000 pages of comic art and stories was the result. But truly, beyond that body of work, perhaps even beyond the Turtles themselves, something else happened. I guess it could be described as a movement. People, fans, supporters, they all came together first for the characters, then for each other. And us, the creators on the other side of the table. You were there for us as well. My part was a small one, really. It's the fans that deserve the most credit for what the Turtles have achieved. I know from many of you, these guys are much more than just drawings on a page. I feel it too. They're friends, they're fellow travelers through life. They're someone with whom we've shared an adventure. I can't easily express the enormity of my gratitude for allowing me to be a part of this. Also, from this era of storytelling, we have Tristan Jones, who said, I turned 40 with these guys. And as one of those rare cases that grew up with the Mirage Turtles more than the iterations with the catchy theme songs, being a part of that world as my first professional job in comics is still such a surreal experience. Coming back to that world nearly 20 years later and finding it so easy to just snap back into that world and those characters after so much time has passed is a genuine testament to the world Kevin and Peter created. It was an honor then, and coming back into things now with the life I've had, the privilege of living between propels that into an indescribably powerful place for me. And to be back here with Paul Harmon is a testament to the care being put into things by everyone who's taken the Turtles into their care since. The only problem is now I just want to do more. So hopefully everyone enjoys. There is something special for me about the Mirage run, about the Saturday morning run, about the Archie run, about the 80s cartoon run, because this is the stuff that I grew up on. There are experiences around these characters. There are connections. There are friends. There are people involved in thinking about these stories, because this for me is right in that same vein as Power Rangers, because these were the stories that were the soundtrack for my childhood. And I remember being on the playground and playing Power Rangers, playing TMNT, and growing up with these versions even before it was cool to be a nerd. Nowadays, it's cool to be a nerd. Now, or then, not so much. But you still had that's the fascinating thing about Turtles, is it transcended what it meant to be a nerd. It transcended all of that because it was such a big deal. So my hope is that specifically for the Mirage era, that this will be an on-ramp for new fans or at least fans that have never been exposed to that era of turtle storytelling are able to be introduced to that world, because that world contains many of the stories told that are now just accepted canon, just accepted lore into the background of the turtles, things like that. A lot of those beats that harken back to Japan, that harken back to that long-standing rivalry between the turtles and Shredder, or the long-standing rivalry between Splinter and Shredder and different clans and all of that sort of stuff. All of that was born in Mirage. That's part of why we're going back and covering that era here on the channel, because it's foundational and honestly has some of the best stories that have ever been told by the turtles. It's why they've been adapted into the different mediums. But again, I'm biased. And from here, move on. Like I said, 2 stories in the IDW era. Guys, this is the current lifeblood of the Turtles. It has been for the last decade plus. These are the guys that took the comics run and took that ball and ran with it. That was why it's such a big deal to have that universe starting at a new number 1, because it's been the longest running continuity since the inception of the Turtles. And now, again, for those of you that haven't watched the video, you can go back and watch our coverage of the announcement of the new number 1s. But the long and the short of it is that universe is staying intact. It's just resetting with a new number 1, soft reboot. The characters are getting moved into new positions, new stories being told, which I think is great. I think revitalizing that IP is a wonderful, wonderful thing. But that is an era that needs to be celebrated, even though it is a bit more current than some of the other legacy versions that we are going to be talking about, that we are going to be celebrating. One story set in the Saturday Morning Adventures universe. So this one, you guys get a little bit of a backstory on me. I am a second generation chef. And I remember Sunday mornings, my old man would take me into the restaurant and he would sit me down, and I'd be sitting at the booth with the Sunday comics. And I would sit there and I would read every single one of them, and I would immerse myself in these stories. And we would do estate cleanouts, and I would get my hands on some of the older comics runs and some of the older like comic strip sort of things. And so seeing the more lighthearted version of the Turtles celebrated some of those early days, the building blocks of that serialized storytelling of the Turtles. It's awesome, and it's just lighthearted, and it's a new opportunity for fans to either reimmerse yourself in that world or experience it for the very first time. Speaking of that version of the Turtles, we have the Archie comics run. This is the run that originally started off as a companion piece to the 80s cartoon. There was a very definitive split where they decided to go their own way to establish their own canon, but it is reminiscent of that 80s cartoon, though they tell some weirder stories in the Archie comics run, which I think is a beautiful thing. If you have never experienced the Archie comics version of the Turtles, do yourself the favor and jump into that, because it is a unique and fun take on the Turtles. We have a quote from Chris Allen, who worked on the Archie comics run. Working on the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was the best job I ever had, period. At the time, I thought it was a really fun gig that ended and I had to go find the next thing. But a funny thing happened over the years since. The kids that read the books we made grew up and began reaching out to tell me what an impact we had on them. Honestly, it was hard for me to fully accept and believe, but I've slowly been able to see that this was truly a magical time, not just for myself, but for so many others. I will forever be grateful that I was able to be a part of this history. Cowabunga. Y'all, that says it all. That says it all about the beautiful, beautiful picture that is the impact that a single franchise can have on generations of people. From here, we move to Image Comics. And Image is one of those companies that has kind of a sordid past. They are a complicated company made at a complicated time. And depending on who you ask or what aspect of Image you're talking about, your mileage may vary on the opinions that people have of the company and of the stories that they told. But the reality is that Image, they told some pretty great stories. Even if this is one of the shorter runs for the Turtles, they tried very hard to recapture some of the same look and feel as the Mirage run. And they told some pretty great stories and did some pretty great character work. And so even though it was a shorter run overall, it's a great thing to be able to revisit this era of Turtles storytelling. From here, the next three are set in closer to contemporary versions of the Turtles. And because they are set in the TV universes, I would reckon that these are the stories that people are going to be more well versed in. These are going to be the eras that more people than not have experienced before. You've got the 2003, the 2012, and Rise eras all represented. And the 2003, I've talked about it before. 2003 Turtles, that was that may be my favorite version of the Turtles of all time. We have a quote from Carrie Randolph, who was a contributor and a creator for 2003. TMNT has played a major role in my life since its inception. From being one of the most influential comic books of my youth to being one of the first major jobs of my career, those Turtle Boys have been with me every step of the way. Although no gesture can truly show how much Eastman and Laird have meant to the culture, this is our small attempt at gratitude. We are eternally grateful. We also have Emilio Lopez. There's an old saying in the art space, you'll always get a chance to do things again. 15 years ago, Lloyd Goldfine and myself and Carrie Randolph ended our time on TMNT 2003 with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Turtles Forever, the special 25th anniversary film. And now we're back to continue where we left off. TMNT has always been the gift that keeps on giving. It was my first work in animation and led to a long-standing work relationship with Carrie and work on multiple TMNT related products. When this project came along, Carrie and I wanted Lloyd along for the ride. In a lot of ways, he was TMNT 2003 and pushed hard to get Peter Laird's vision on air. It wouldn't be a proper TMNT 2003 celebration without him. I wish we could have brought the rest of our in-house team along. In short, it is great to be back, and I hope the fans enjoy our return to the world of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2003. Also, happy late 20th anniversary, TMNT 03. Sorry we were late, but like our iteration says, it's Ninja time. To round out the Trinity, we've got Lloyd Goldfine. We were still in the thick of telling our Turtles stories when we were told to put our crayons down. So it's a huge treat to get to work with the Green Team Supreme again and to get to tell a new story with Carrie Randolph and Emilio Lopez, my brothers from the show. It just couldn't be better. when you have an IP that has creators that are just as excited, if not more so, than the audience to tell these stories and to re-enter these worlds, you have something special on your hands. From here, we move to 2012, where we have a word from Ciro Niali. My 2012 incarnation of the Turtles are still alive and roaming New York City. I've had this story idea of the brothers dealing with change, feeling pointless, facing a new threat. They are growing up, grappling with losing their teenage moniker. Toward the end of the series, I pitched it as an animated movie. Unfortunately, it never happened. This short comic interlude is a teaser for that bigger story that never was. It was really exciting to let the boys out to play. I knew I missed them. I didn't realize how much, though. And then from there, we have Rise of the TMNT, which I think is a version that has kind of, I think, appeal has grown as time has gone on for this version of the Turtles. I think Rise came out at a time where the Turtles were kind of in a little bit of a rocky place, and I don't think it had the appeal as that some of the other versions had at first. But then through streaming services, as time went on, people found that there's a lot to be found in that version of the Turtles. And so a new story there in that universe is a welcome addition as well. And then a new story from Eastman himself, who is one of those rare creators that really stayed invested in his creation even after selling it. Even after he could have walked away from it entirely, he stayed and kept himself immersed in the story. Same thing with Peter Laird. He was one of the driving creative voices for '03 to have the tone that it did, to tell the stories that it did. That's why you have so many direct comic adaptations from the Mirage run contained in the '03 story. Your mileage may vary on how much you appreciate it, but for better or for worse, '03 is essentially the Mirage comics adaptation. And I would say that's why so many people herald that as the top version of the Turtles. Everybody has their version, but for a lot of people, the ones that have been more directly influenced by the original creators are some of the standouts. That's part of why IDW has been as good as it has been, because Eastman's been very connected to that universe. Shellheads, we have the ability to re-enter, revisit, and in some cases, visit for the first time a variety of different universes, all under this same wonderful franchise. July 11th, this one hits. And I urge all of you, young, old, new, lifelong, go out, go to your local comic shop, pick this one up, because this, guys, is going to be something special. All right, Shellheads. That's it. That's all. That's a wrap. Until next time, Cowabunga, Shellheads.